Morning, Sarah.
Morning.
Tried to make sure it wasn't too early for you guys.
No, it's early.
For you, Tony, it's early.
Yes.
You got kids to get ready for school.
I was up and then, yeah.
Good. Good. We ready to start, or?
Yes, we are. Let's get started. Who'd like to go?
Why do you like Nikhil Alexander Walker?
I thought it would, when there was an opportunity to acquire him, we've always, here with the Jazz, and just when you see opportunities to acquire a young player who, has had some minutes and some developmental time and some rotational minutes in the NBA, that has skills and tools, and we've always wanted to bet on our coaching staff, our culture here, our development staff, to take, some of the really good things that I think Nikhil shows and make it even better. All of the intel and even the brief chances that I've had a chance to spend time with him here. We did a lot of work on him in the draft as well. Great kid, hard worker. Like I said before, has tools. So having him come in here, get settled, we play in a different way than he's been raised in the NBA. I think he'll acclimate pretty quickly, and then it'll add another option for Q. And then, the other part that we like is that, contractually he's still on his rookie scale deal, so he's got a developmental pathway, not only this season but going into next, for him to really integrate here.
What was the impact on the ability to get somebody that's on the rookie scale deal that was the number 17 pick, just going forward for this roster, because this roster isn't one of the youngest ever?
It's not?
Nah.
No. I would say certainly that, that's something that we look at as far as, adding some youth, but not completely new to the NBA. I would say, Tony, that we would look at those opportunities, whatever our timeline in terms of our competitiveness of our team, whether we're a young rebuilding team or we're a playoff competitive team or we're trying to be a championship contending team. I think anytime those opportunities come up that we try to do that, because it's never just, and I've said it before, you guys have heard it plenty of times, it's not just what are we doing for the next 4 months, what are we doing for the next year. These are all on, Nikhil has a chance to be here on a multi-year timeline, and you always have to have a chance to add some of those guys. Even some of our previous players who aren't here now, but they start in a role where maybe not playing a sixth wing, a guy coming over from Europe, and then 3 or 4 years later they're starters or huge contributors, and that happens over a period of 3 or 4 years as these guys develop with our staff. So this is the start here for Nikhil, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
Just in terms of adding a guy who's maybe a little bit more of a long-term prospect than necessarily an immediate impact guy, how did kind of the market develop in terms of, looking at guys who fit the former category, and I guess what was kind of the price tag for that? Sure.
So, I don't want to get into any individual stuff, like all the things that could have happened or didn't happen or did happen. Like, you're dealing with 29 other teams, and they have their own stuff, and what's unique about the trade deadline as opposed to the moratorium period or draft stuff is that there's just a hard deadline. So if you don't have something finished and done and called into the league by one mountain, like whatever could have happened or not, there's always sorts of stories that float around in the coming days. But Eric, your question, it gives me an opportunity to just really kind of talk about our process. I was really excited, and it was a lot of fun with Danny, with our group, how connected we are, the process that we were all in the room together as these things, not only just in one day. This isn't something where we just show up and it's trade deadline day. So this is the process that's been evolving over the last couple months of us all being together. Danny's experience and just a great experience, gives us and different perspective from, his years in Boston, and, some of our guys that have been here with me for quite a long time in elevated roles, and also some of our new guys and girls that have come in to be part of this. It was just a really collaborative process, where I feel really confident in the amount of information on what we knew about the market and what was going on, and every opportunity that came our way that we were able to look at and understand and make really good decisions. From where we stand as a team, we're a very competitive team. When we're healthy, when we're connected, we have a chance to contend for a title. And so in this market, and I think it's bared out in, everything else that happened, where we have a core group of guys that a lot of other teams, obviously have interest in, but our job as a front office is to evaluate, is there anything that can make us better, as opposed to just change for change that makes us worse? Because when we're connected and healthy, as I said, we're very, very good. And I'm excited about this group. We want to make a bet on this group that all of the things that we've gone through this year with injuries and COVID, we still have proof of concept in this group. I think some of the adversity that we've gone through with COVID and injuries have allowed some of our younger players to take advantage of their opportunities, and that's what happens during a season. It's not a static thing, so guys are continuing to prepare and develop with our coaching staff, and then they get an opportunity to play. And by playing consecutively or continually, even if it's just a 3 or 4 game stretch, but they get experience that gives them confidence, gives their teammates confidence in them, and really can bind a team together, even if some of the guys that have been playing a ton of minutes when we've been hurt or out with COVID may or may not be in a playoff rotation. But it gives us the ability to continue to manage the regular season with more depth. And then obviously whatever those possibilities going forward with next year, the year after, as these young players continue to develop, them really taking advantage of those opportunities. I'm really proud of that young group, and obviously proud of our coaching staff for putting in the work and those guys being ready.
Justin, when you get a player like this who's fairly new in the league and find out, do you go back to your scouting of college? What weighs the most when you're evaluating a younger player still on their first contract that you're bringing in?
We like Nikhil in the draft, as I said before. His length, his character, his work ethic, all of that stuff, I think, has continued to bear out in when he was starting in the league. I think any player that comes into our system and our group here, our group has a track record of trying to optimize those guys, and we think that he's got the tools to do that. I don't know, it's up to coach in terms of what role he plays this year or next year. I think there's going to be a settling period where, a highly competitive team, he's coming into a situation where he's not on a rebuilding or a retooled team. But I think he's got the capacity to adapt, to improve, and I think maybe, the opportunity to be in different roles than what you've just seen on TV in the last couple of years with another team is we take a look at those tools, his work ethic, and see where he can best fit for himself and for us. And I think, we've done that with other players that have come from other teams and come in here and really trying to optimize what works for them and also what works for us.
Say maybe you're touching on with the tools, but do you look at, by definition, to some extent, if you're getting a player on their first contract, it hasn't gone perfectly where they were. Do you look for some analytics that say, oh, this is a sign that there's something there, that the 37% shooting is not true because of this or something? Are there things in that, and was there anything specifically here that you noticed?
I don't think you can, until you get a guy in your building to really see that. I think evaluating, obviously there was a ton of evaluation from a video standpoint, continuing to follow the league, our pro personnel group. Anytime anybody comes into the league, we're watching everyone. We're gathering intel. We're looking at their situation, what their kind of growth path has been, and for us, it was an opportunity to make a bet on a guy that became available. That wasn't even sure was going to be available. It came up and it was an opportunity that we decided to grab, and then now the work begins for him, for himself, and here it's an opportunity for him to be in a new situation around a different group of guys, take what he's learned from previous stops or stop really. Portland was like one day, and then apply it here. And so, like I said, that's a multi-month process. That's not just come in and do that. Where he is in his career, I think there's even an adjustment period if you're talking about an older player that comes in. I think there's always an adjustment period here with how we play, how connected we are, what we ask our guys to do, and that takes a little getting used to. I wouldn't say it's the only place in the NBA that we're like that. There's lots of other teams that are like that, but I think some people underestimate the adjustment period sometimes that it takes, whether you're a rookie, you're a 3-year player, you're a 10-year vet.
It seems to me like one of the swing decisions of this was whether or not you guys wanted to use a first-round pick in this deadline, and how important is that asset to you, or those assets, those future picks that you have, as far as how would you view those assets, and where I'm trying to figure out the best way to put this, but like deciding whether or not to value those future assets over kind of the current window.
Sure. I'm not really arguing with you, Andy. I think there's always a value proposition of the assets that you have. That goes for future picks. Future picks are what they could be or what they are, what they return to you, and what kind of timeline that is. Again, going back for certainly there's this trade deadline window where we investigated every possible situation and what the value coming back, how much can it make us better? Can it definitively make us better? And that's a high bar with this group because we're really good. So every deal is sort of in a vacuum of things that come up, whether using a future asset, using a player, that there was just not anything definitive that reached a bar, whether using a future first or not. So to answer the first part of it, obviously future firsts are very valuable. So are, high-level rotation players that are playing for the Jazz that have proof of concept and we're really good. So it really depends on, the value you set forward. I don't put any higher value because of scarcity. They exist in their own value, if that makes sense. Like, if we had 10 future first-round picks, it's not like you're throwing them out like candy, and if you only have a couple, then you have to make a value proposition for those. Does that make sense?
Were you surprised that Daniel House was available for a 10-day originally? And then what did you see from him in that limited time that he got here?
Sure. It's probably haven't had enough time to reflect on just how we've all been living with COVID, in different respects for the last 2 or 3 years. So I'm sure, maybe in the off season, I'll reflect a little bit more about just how crazy, for us it was January. For other teams, it started in October, November, and December. But in that kind of period, with the COVID hardship rules, you really saw a large group of players get an opportunity that really in a normal NBA season, that volume of those opportunities are just not available. And we kind of looked at that with every other team that was going through it, and we hadn't gone through it. But it kind of was instructive for us that we were able to prepare, if this happens to us, or probably better said, when this happens to us, we'll be able to take advantage of that. So it was an opportunity for us to evaluate some of these guys, like we do all the time. But, the pro personnel group is we had just ready lists. And usually you're looking at that, post-trade deadline, you got a couple spots, or, training camp when you want to fill out a roster. And this has happened mid-season, and I think it was over 100 spots in the NBA that were, COVID hardship ones. So you get to see some of those guys play, and then you're constantly just focusing on it when you have to go sign 2 or 3 guys at one time. So with Daniel, he had obviously had a 5 years, I think 5 years in the league and has been part of some really productive, deep playoff run teams as a rotational player or even starting. He started in Houston at the beginning of the year, and then, their situation has changed, a lot in the last 18 months. COVID hits, he gets his finger banged, and, with the Knicks is available. And we just looked at him as like, hey, this is an opportunity because he's a guy that is still, a young veteran. He's right in the middle of his career, and he stayed ready. His activity level, his ability to defend, his ability to make a shot. We wanted to give him a shot, and he is integrated seamlessly within this group in those two, really 3 10 days that we had, and got confidence of his teammates. And when he was still available after we got through the deadline, it made sense. He'd done well with his opportunity, and like to see it continue. So I'm excited to add him. And I think he helps us as another option for coach. A guy that is coming in and play hard, has good size at the wing, will defend, and obviously understands spacing very well from his days in Houston and our spacing here. That was probably pretty helpful for him to integrate very quickly because he understands that at a high level. So we're excited to add him.
Do you expect Daniel and Nikhil to be available tonight? Yes, I do.
There's no trade, contractual, injury, anything that prevents any of that. So those guys are both here, and I came in here. I haven't talked to Health Performance, but I don't know of any issues of anything like that. So yeah, I would expect them. I expect them both to be in shoot around today.
Justin, I apologize, I probably should know this, I'm just confused by the rule changes on two-way.
Mm-hmm.
Does Trent Forrest have to be moved to the regular roster to be able to be playoff eligible, or is that gone this year because they changed all the two-way rules?
Well, I listened to you this morning
Okay.
on DJ and PK on my drive in, and you said I don't know like 3 different times.
Yeah.
And if you just read Sarah's article this morning, you would know.
DJ seemed to have read Sarah's article.
I think so, and Andy knows, and Tony knows, and Eric knows, and Ryan knows.
So I apologize.
That's
about
okay.
that.
We'll take the time for you. This year, two-way play. They've changed some of the two-way rules, but as in the past, two-way players are not eligible for the playoffs.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That being said, you want to sign Trent Forrest to a deal.
So here's the second part, David. So the changes in the two-way rules right now is that instead of days, it's games, and there used to be a cap on an individual player how many games they could play or be active for in two-way. They've altered that, so anytime it's past 50 games, the player, if he plays past 50 games, Trent's making an NBA minimum for every game that he plays going forward. So what we will do from now and so until the regular season, he's on an NBA minimum, converted or not. So what we will do is continue to take this time throughout the rest of the regular season and make sure that we are optimized for the playoffs. So that flexibility with our spots, in and out, all that stuff, we will just constantly evaluate it, and then when the playoffs come, that's when we're going to have to make a decision.
Just since we haven't brought up Juancho Hernan-Gomez yet, what did you see out of him to encourage you to bring him in?
Sure. So, Juancho's, I felt bad for him a little bit for, this season. I think he's been kind of moved around a lot, and I don't think that's indicative of the type of player or what kind of contribution he can make in the NBA. He's still very young. He's 26. A lot of national team experience, has been in different systems. He's a guy that will, add to our group, will add to our depth. I think the amount of international players that we have, he's got relationships already for playing with these guys or against these guys in national teams, and obviously being in our division at various points in time. So I think he'll fit in great. You know, as far as it just adds to our depth and having another guy that with 4 or 5 years of experience in the NBA and that can play if called upon, and he's proven that in the league.